Ethiopia inaugurates edible oil factory that can supply 60% of local demand. And Ambassador Dina Mufti Lord's 34th AU Summit as successful. Plus, Somalia vote under threat as leaders in deadlock. This is Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Shifara Lako. Thank you for watching us. President Sahle-Work Zewde has urged all Ethiopians to join hands in rebuilding Tigray. The president has visited several humanitarian and other activities in Mekelle City. President Sahle-Work has visited Ida Referral Hospital, Federal Food Stockpile in Mekelle, and shelters of the displaced who fled their homes in several areas of the region due to the law enforcement operation. The president has consulted with religious leaders and elders of the community on the ongoing rehabilitation activities in Tigray. Religious leaders and elders who discussed with the president urged the government to address the adverse situation related to joblessness and equip public institutions with necessary equipment so that they can resume services in proper manner. Community representatives further called upon the government to prioritize peace and health care service delivery and strengthen the ongoing humanitarian assistance in the region. The president stated the government is aggressively working to fully restore peace and return the overall activity to normalcy, calling citizens to join hands towards rehabilitation and rebuilding activities in the region. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, along with Deputy Prime Minister Dammaqe Mokonnin and other high-ranking government officials, has visited Bure Industry Park's development. The senior government officials have inaugurated today Fibela Edible Oil Factory, the giant palm oil processing plant in Africa. Kasaun Chane presents the story as follows.
A very warm welcome to this grand event, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia.
Fibela Oil Factory, that is believed to meet 60% of the local edible oil demand of Ethiopia, incorporates complex 5 factories that process sesame, animal feed, and soap and detergent, among other products. Factory that has been set up by the Ethiopian investor Belayne Kende with an outlay of 4.5 billion birr is expected to create 30,000 jobs for citizens. It also includes the production of margarine, plastic, and cardboard.
Today, the inauguration of this factory in Bure town is a great deal as it is pioneer for the sector. It is bringing back the fame of the area as it remains to be fertile and prosperous. This is a responsible stride as it gives great opportunity for fellow citizens to take part in the employment opportunities. The establishment of the agro-industry factory is instrumental to ensure import substitutions. The processing of edible oil in the country is beneficial to health and the economy.
Factory will have significant role in stabilizing the domestic market of edible oil before going to export. University students in Debre Marcos are responsible to make the agro-industry park conducive for developing the area for recreation as well. The Premier said next time he will take part in planting seedlings in this park.
The previous story was presented by Daniel Kasaun. Our apologies. In another story, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the Ethiopian government's law enforcement in Tigray state came at a high cost. Ending the suffering in Tigray and around the country is now his highest priority, the Premier stated in an article he wrote to the Project Syndicate magazine. Kasaun Chane presents the story as follows.
In his article entitled Toward a Peaceful Order in the Horn of Africa, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said his government's success in the law enforcement measures against the TPLF came at a high cost, and the humanitarian situation in northern Tigray remains grave. But only Ethiopia at peace with a government bound by human norms of conduct can play a constructive role across the region and beyond his trust. Operations undertaken by the Ethiopian federal government have freed the Tigrayan people from decades of misrule by the Tigray People's Liberation Front TPLF. This has ignited new hopes but also anxieties about Ethiopia's future and Earth's role in the Horn of Africa and beyond, he said. The hopes stem from the removal for good of the corrupt and dictatorial TPLF. Ethiopians can now imagine a future based not on ethnic chauvinism but unity, equality, freedom and democracy. Moreover, the source of ethnic division that had poisoned interstate relations across the Horn of Africa has now been overcome, Abiy wrote. But he cannot deny that the removal of the TPLF has fueled unease in the international community. Concerns about ethnic profiling in Tigray and obstacles to humanitarian relief abound. His government is determined to address and dispel these concerns. Quoting Thomas Jefferson's remark, the Premier said, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind compelled him to explain why his government acted to restore peace in Tigray, how they are alleviating suffering there, and why their efforts supported. He hopes by the international community will benefit all his country's people, including those in Tigray and throughout the greater Horn. No government can tolerate air soldiers and innocent civilians being ambushed and killed in their dozens, as happened at the hands of the TPLF last October. His primary duty as Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief of the National Armed Forces, after all, is to protect Ethiopia and its people from internal and external enemies, he added. The government's operations in Tigray were designed to restore peace and order quickly. In this, they succeeded, but the suffering and disease that occurred despite their best efforts have caused much distress for him as well as for all peace-loving people here and abroad. Indeed, the suffering in Tigray and around the country is now his highest priority. This is why he is calling for the United Nations and international relief agencies to work with his government so that they can together deliver effective relief to all in Tigray who need it, Abiy underlined. Meanwhile, they are working day and night to deliver necessary supplies to their citizens in Tigray and to those in want in neighboring provinces, as well as to ensure that human rights are respected and normal lives restored, despite the hopes of mentioned challenges to overcome in due course. For example, reconnecting communication lines deliberately destroyed by the TPLF is testing their capacity to deliver humanitarian aid. And this work of reconstruction, the international community can be of enormous help. His government is also prepared to assist community leaders in Tigray who are dedicated to peace. Indeed, they are already reaching out to them. Abiy indicated that with this article that the international community understood what the TPLF was. Many had condemned its ethnic-based violence. Sadly, some were ready to turn a blind eye to TPLF torture, disappearances and extrajudicial killings. Without the TPLF, it was said, Ethiopia risked fragmenting along ethnic lines, like Yugoslavia in the 1990s. Ethiopia's collapse, the argument went, would usher in chaos across the Horn of Africa. He further mentioned that TPLF-induced challenges in terms of his administration's reform measures since he came to power, and the roughly 5 years leading to his election in April 2018 as leader of the then ruling Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, which until then had included the TPLF. Popular challenges to the regime multiplied. The TPLF responded with its usual brutality. The 2018 vote moved the country in a new and inclusive direction. The political party he now leads is the first in Ethiopia that is not based on race, religion or ethnicity. Moreover, the premier illustrated that the TPLF's regional policy was a crude extension of its domestic divide and rule strategy. TPLF Ethiopia, for example, adopted a policy of exclusion on ostracism toward Eritrea, against which it waged proxy wars from the sovereign territory of unstable neighboring countries, entrenching their fragility. Abiy shared his belief that Ethiopia free of the TPLF will champagne peace and inclusive development. Internally, the new Ethiopia will be based on equality among all of their constituent groups, including the suffering people of Tigray. Externally, they will act in a way that recognizes that their national interests are inseparable, linked to those of their neighbors, he hopes. The peace deal signed with Eritrea in 2018 is a living example of what Ethiopia is able and willing to do. That agreement resolved a violent two-decade-old stalemate and allowed Eritrea to reintegrate within the own and the global community. Most important, its citizens and those in this country residing along the border can now live without the shadow of war hanging over them. Prime Minister Abiy expressed his aspirations to cement Ethiopia's relations with their other neighbors and reminded readers about Ethiopia's role in Sudan and Somalia. Following the political crisis in Sudan 2019, Ethiopia was instrumental in bringing that country back from the brink of civil war, helping create a transitional government of civilians and military representatives. Likewise, Ethiopia's stabilizing role in Somalia is second to none, and the government's efforts to bring stability to South Sudan are unbroken, he mentioned. Ethiopia's current foreign policy is premised on a belief that closer regional integration benefits all. Their efforts to make operational the African Continental Free Trade Area are a key part of this. He evidenced his remarks with the government's recent inauguration of a highway that links the Addis Ababa-Nairobi-Mombasa corridor, a project that removes physical barriers to cross-border trade between Kenya and Ethiopia. Likewise, the road from Addis Ababa to the Eritrean port of Assab is being rehabilitated as a transport artery for international trade. Moreover, in partnership with the private sector, new expressways are being planned to connect Ethiopia with the ports of Djibouti and Assab to replace the older road now being rehabilitated, which will then be linked with Juba, South Sudan's capital, providing that impoverished landlocked country with a viable outlet for trade, he envisioned. Joint projects in ports and logistics, industry parks and potash mining are also being developed, and it is his profound hope that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, when completed, will gain the support of all of their neighbors and offer unprecedented opportunities for everyone in East Africa, he said.
Now moving on, Ambassador Dina Mufti launched the 34th AU Summit as successful. In an exclusive interview with ETV this evening, the ambassador says the summit deliberated on a range of agendas, including COVID-19 vaccines, silencing the guns, having common aviation and development. Take a listen.
This year, COVID-19 has been one of the critical agendas, one of the focuses of the African Union. The idea of overcoming this challenge is out there. The idea of disseminating vaccinations all over Africa is aimed at not letting anyone to be left out, that every African in a short while should be vaccinated. Donors, entrepreneurs, and resources should be mobilized by the African Union itself, and the vaccination project has to be implemented. These are one of the agendas as well. Well, there was an agenda of silencing the gun by 2020, which unfortunately could not be fully materialized because still there are certain, gunshots here and there in Africa. And peace and security again is also on the top of the agenda. Development as well, integration as well, strengthening Africa, especially there had been a success that had been registered in the areas of creating free trade zone for African countries.
The summit is expected to come up with new decisive outcomes that can help the Union move a step forward, Dina mentioned.
These assemblies, normally they come out with the declarations. Very soon we'll get the details of the declarations actually this evening. And this declaration normally revolves around those major ideas. And the strategies and tactics of implementing them will be mapped out by each region and each country, so that everybody will take the responsibility of implementing it. And coming out with this decision itself is an achievement by itself. Implementation is another round, and definitely everybody is hoping that these decisions and declarations by the Assembly will be implemented for the sake of the African peace, African security, and African prosperity.
The ambassador further stated that the 34th AU summit has so far been fruitful.
It was successful. The new president of this assembly, which has taken up the leadership from the previous president, that is South African president. The current president, as you know, is the president of DRC, has expressed his thanks for the host country, that is Ethiopia. He expressed his particular gratitude for the President, Her Excellency Sahle-Work and the Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, for the successful hosting and warm hospitality the leadership have accorded him and his delegation, because he is in the city. He has already taken over the helm of the leadership from the previous President of South Africa at the Mandela Hall here in the AU headquarters. And it was so successful because it has been accomplished with a sense of valor and victory.
Now, the World Food Programme affirms that the need for a strong partnership between the government of Ethiopia and the entire humanitarian community to rapidly scale up a collective response to meet the immediate humanitarian needs of the people in Tigray. It said in a statement that there have been recent positive engagements with the government of Ethiopia by senior UN officials, including the Under-Secretary General for Safety and Security, the High Commissioner for Refugees, and the Executive Director of the World Food Programme. The statement further depicts that the engagements have acknowledged the commendable measures being undertaken by the government and partners to address humanitarian needs in Tigray. They have also concluded that humanitarian assistance must be expanded and intensified without delay. The WFP also commends the emergency food assistance that the government and partners have already provided to the people of Tigray since the onset of the crisis, reaching almost 1.7 million people with emergency food distributions. 26,000 Eritrean refugees residing in 2 camps have also received food and nutrition assistance. WFP has indicated to the government its readiness to add to these efforts and has accordingly accepted requests from the government to augment the transportation capacity of the government and partners to deliver humanitarian assistance into and within Tigray. Besides, it will continue to procure and deliver food supplies on behalf of the government, including 300,000 metric tons of wheat scheduled for delivery from February. So far, 1.8 million people in need in the Tigray region have received humanitarian support. The government of Ethiopia stated there is a supply stock in Mekelle city to support 2.5 million people for the next 2 months. It was noted that WFP Director David Beasley, United Nations resident and humanitarian coordinator in Ethiopia, Catherine Sozi, along with Ethiopian Peace Minister Muferiat Kamil, have observed the humanitarian activities being underway in Tigray. The Ethiopian Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Sleshi Bekele, reaffirmed Ethiopia's commitment to continuing to resolve disputes with lower riparian countries regarding the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam through dialogue. The minister underlined that Ethiopia never aspired to hurt its neighbors, but it strived to benefit them. The minister made the remark in an interview with Al Jazeera. Emmanuel Jorde presents the story compiled by the Ethiopian news agency.
Ethiopian Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy Selashi Bekele told Al Jazeera that Ethiopia's unchanging stance regarding disputes over the $4.6 billion GERD is to resolve through discussions. The minister noted that tripartite negotiations have resulted in some agreements, including technical issues. However, he said they have been very careful on issues which may affect Ethiopia's right towards developmental activities in the coming time.
There are legal issues that are explicitly or impliedly trying to foreclose Ethiopia's future development right and interest. Therefore, we have to be careful in concluding this kind of rules and guidelines.
He pointed out that Ethiopia has a standoff pre-agreement on Article 5A of the guideline for the filling of the dam.
Ethiopia suggested, and let's conclude first agreement based on the first filling up to the full level, and then continue negotiating on the difficult part, which is the operational one, which is entangled with rules that are beyond the GERD. Therefore, that is where we have, serious contention and still didn't conclude.
Elaborating on the point of disruption of the AU process, he stated that Ethiopia never blocked the AU process, but that it was insisting on the continuation of the platform. Therefore, the discussion should focus on administrative issues mentioned in Article 5, Sub-Article 2, Selashi said.
The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is a single project for Ethiopia. Ethiopia has future development needs for power generation, for agricultural productivity project, for drinking water supply, for industrialization. But trying to hinder Ethiopia's future development by putting in a certain type of article that prevents, or explicitly or impliedly, Ethiopia will not agree to that.
Ethiopia is not focusing on its development only, but also on the development of the region, he disclosed, adding that when it has excess electricity, it can share to the region. Asked whether the GERD is a political project to control the Nile water, the minister emphasized that the dam is not designed and built for political purpose. The multi-billion-dollar dam was rather meant to harness the socio-economic benefits that particular infrastructure provides.
It is very near to the border with Sudan. About 20 or 40 kilometers maximum from the border. This is, in fact, a huge infrastructure that serves to transform Sudan. This is really a fake accusation because it's not built for political purpose. It's rather to transform the life and the livelihood of 110 million people in Ethiopia who actually contributed, each and every walk of life, contributed resource actually to build this dam.
The country has not achieved universal electricity access, and access to electricity is very low. Some 65 million people in Ethiopia are without electricity.
Now in our continental news, Somalia's divided political leaders have failed to agree on how to proceed with elections in emergency talk. A government minister has announced just days before the end of the president's current term. Goshumelis has more on that from Africa News.
Somalia's deadline to pick a new president is due on Monday, but that is now unlikely after negotiations between the central government and federal states collapsed. Somalia's president, who is seeking another term, accused two of the 5 semi-autonomous regions, Puntland and Jubaland, of failing to compromise.
For the last meeting of Samareb 4 held in Do Samareb, I expected that the meeting would be fruitful. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. As you know, the Minister Dube explained last night the reasons of the meeting's failure.
It means a deal to hold indirect parliamentary and presidential elections this year are scuppered. The country aimed to hold a direct election, but delays in preparations and daily attacks by Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab insurgents prevented that.
The president himself is the main impasse to the elections. It is not under any question. It is clear the president of the federal government is responsible for all problems because he wants to rig the election.
Since 1991, Somalia has only had a limited central government. It is trying to rebuild with UN help, but now that plan is under threat.
Finally, a quick reminder of the top stories. Ethiopia inaugurates edible oil factory that can meet 60% of local demand. Ambassador Dina Mufti dubs 34th AU Summit successful. And Somalia vote under threat as leaders in deadlock. That's all the news there is for now. Many thanks for watching us and bye-bye.